Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey. And there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 424. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another exciting guest. Today, we're talking about misadventure in the mountains. I have got a new guest, Courtney Clifton. We are both members of this fantastic Facebook group for women runners, and Courtney recently posted a link to her blog where she told the story of a misadventure where she ended up going out for a run and spending the night on the mountain, alone. I was really fascinated by her story, and I wanted to get her on the show to pick apart her experience and see what went wrong and what went well. Courtney made a lot of good decisions, which led to her coming out of the mountains in one piece with no injuries. She was fine. She just needed to stay overnight in the woods. I think the more we can learn from our own adventures and misadventures as well as other people's, the safer we will be in the outdoors. So I hope you enjoy her stories as much as I did. We get into all kinds of things. We talk about misadventure in the woods, in the forest, getting accompanied by cougars on the trail. This was a separate incident, getting chased by deer, all kinds of stuff. So it's really, really useful for all kinds of adventures in the backwoods. So who is Courtney Clifton? Courtney has been running for about a decade, and she branched into trails and ultras last year. She's never done an official ultra race, and she truly enjoys route planning, self-sufficiency, and the research involved with plotting and running her own courses. She's also a single mom of a wonderful 4-year-old, and she doesn't have a lot of extra cash to be able to afford race entry fees. The past several years have seen a lot of challenges in her personal life, including 2 deaths in the family, divorce, and of course COVID. So Courtney has turned to the trails for a way to cope, and they have definitely delivered. I have links to her blog and to her Strava profile in the show notes if you'd like to check her out. So what are you going to learn? We talk about how Courtney ended up unexpectedly spending a night alone on the trails. We talk about what went wrong, what went right, and what Courtney would do differently. We talk about how to deal with other surprises on the trails, like cougars and deer. Usually when I see deer on the trails, they're just kind of standing off in the distance and looking at me or running away, but Courtney got chased by a deer, so what do you do? That's what we talk about. We also share Courtney's tips for people who want to get started having solo adventures, and finally, we talk about how to get started setting FKTs, or fastest known times. And we kind of launched into talking about FKTs, and then I realized I didn't really explain what that was. So not everyone knows what that is. Fastest known time means the fastest known time for completing a specific trail. So whether that's a really long trail, like, I don't know, Pacific Crest Trail in the United States, or something shorter like South Downs Way here in England, like there are tons of trails all over, and people are setting these records for running these trails and running these loops and running these routes. And it's really exciting because it's a great way to see what other people are doing, and it's a great way to kind of push yourself into trying to set a record. And Courtney says something really great on her blog that I loved, which is that FKTs are always borrowed because you set a record and then someone else is going to try to improve on that. So it's like you don't expect to like hold that record for years. But I think she's got a great attitude about it, and it's something that I've been thinking about myself, but haven't tried or haven't even looked into any FKT routes in my area. So I'm going to look into that now. So without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Thank you. Hello, Courtney.
Hi, Holly.
I'm super excited to talk about running with you.
Me too. Thanks for inviting me to
Oh,
join.
really glad to have you here today. So please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So, in terms of running, I'm a trail runner. I just kind of like doing lots of runs and adventures on my own, seeing lots of beautiful mountain lakes and hills. I'm a single mom. I have a beautiful 4-year-old boy and work from home and have been doing that since COVID started. And beyond that, I just keep myself busy with an online course.
Hmm.
And I don't know what else. Anything else?
So how did you first get into running?
So I did a little bit of running in high school and off and on through college, but I kept injuring myself because I didn't know how to strength train and I would get shin splints and then I
Oh.
wouldn't run for a few months. And then I would get back at it. But then after college, I got more into it. And I was more into like the marathon and half marathon
Hmm.
road running. But I really, in the past couple of years, have been more interested in trails, kind of what you were just mentioning.
Yeah, trails are the best.
Yes.
So how is it running as a single mom? Because obviously you've got childcare to deal with. How do you fit your runs into your schedule?
Do a lot of lunch runs.
Hmm.
I just bought a treadmill, so I have that kind of as a last resort.
Hmm.
And then my son's dad does have him on one day on the weekends. So that is helpful. And then I do have family nearby too. But yeah, and he will go in my stroller as well. And I'll take him to the track and let him play when I do track
Oh,
workouts.
nice.
Yeah.
So you've got it all set.
Yeah, I do.
Good. So the reason I'd asked you to come on the show is because we're in the same Facebook group for women runners, which is my favorite
Yes.
Facebook group ever.
It's a
It's
great
so
one.
supportive. And you had posted about an unexpected night in the forest and immediately like clicked through to read it. It was a blog post that you had written about your misadventure. And I was just so fascinated by your story. And I think there's so much we can learn from our misadventures as well as our adventures. So, can you tell us a little bit about your unexpected night in the forest?
Sure. I guess to start to lead up, I had been planning this trip to do the Wonderland Trail around
Hmm.
Mount Rainier for like almost a year with a friend and had it just about set, except we didn't have campsites. And lots of them are first come, first served. So we showed up the night before we were planning to run and it was all full.
Mm.
And I was so upset because normally I'm like a pretty easygoing person, but when I put so much like time and effort and like heart into something like that,
Mm.
it just kind of crushed me not being able to do the trail and having to turn around that night. We got back home around 2 a.m.
Mm.
and I'd already arranged childcare for my son for the whole weekend. And so I felt like I had to do something epic. And I'd been looking at the FKT website and trying to scope out some routes, and I had seen this one that was looked very beautiful. It was 26 miles in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness. And I'd already looked at like a YouTube video of it and had kind of scoped it out, and I felt like that would be a good choice because 26 miles is not it's up there, but it's not impossible to do in
Mm.
a day
Hmm.
for me, especially like, I mean, depending on the terrain and the route, like could take me anywhere from like 3 to 8 hours, like,
Hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, I woke up really early the next morning, just kind of without setting an alarm. I had all my stuff ready because I'd already packed for the Wonderland. So I
Mm.
kind of got in the car and got to the trail and got started. I had forgotten some of my food because it had been in a separate bag. I didn't notice because I was tired.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I didn't really think like it would be that big of a deal. Like when I did notice, I was already on the trail and I was like, yeah, it'll be fine, because I'll be out before you know it, which did not happen.
Mm.
So as I was going on the trail, it was easy for the first, I want to say like 8 miles or so, or the first like 12K.
Hmm.
Um, and then you start going off trail, which I knew going into it. But it's a little confusing, especially when you start getting near the peak that you have to traverse. And I didn't know at the time that my app actually had the topo. I just hadn't downloaded the the
Oh.
layers onto it, or it would have been way easier. But I was basically following the GPS track on my watch, and it would say off course, and then I would try to like go around and okay, which peak is this? Because there's so many peaks I'm looking up at, and I knew the elevation. I knew kind of where I was supposed to be, but I was just like second guessing myself and getting tired.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to think like maybe I should turn around, but I felt like it would be easier if I kept going,
Yeah.
because it would just be downhill on the other side. That's what I thought. But long story short, I got to the top of the peak finally. And then it's basically bushwhacking for a good, I want to say like a good 500 feet downhill. It's not very long, but it's like it would just keep cliffing out unexpectedly. And my legs were just like wobbly noodles. And I just felt like I just had a couple falls where I would just like slide down the brush or the rocks. And it got really scary. And so I felt like I had to spend the night, which was not in my plans at all. And the mosquitoes were attacking me as well. But, I didn't really have a choice. So I did have an emergency blanket, and I got that out. I got my windbreaker, my rain jacket. I did have a Garmin inReach. I texted my friend throughout this time, and she'd wanted to send search and rescue, but I told her I didn't want to because I was embarrassed. And I was fine. Like, can you imagine like getting rescued and you're just fine? Like I wasn't physically hurt, except for a few scratches. But I didn't sleep at all. I just like lied there until the morning, and then eventually made it out the next day. But it took like almost 2 full days. And no, I did not submit that as an FKT, but.
So you didn't achieve the FKT.
There was no woman record. So my thought was, if I don't die, I can get it. But, that was like not funny anymore after I finished.
Yeah, of course. So what do you think went wrong? So you'd mentioned a couple things, like you didn't bring all the food you were planning and navigation problems. And what else do you think contributed to this unexpected night?
Well, I think the food was a big part of it. And also maybe like the sleep deprivation from the night before, probably, because I'd probably only gotten like 3 hours of sleep or something. And then, navigation. It was a little harder than I expected. Even doing your research, you can't really know everything. And
I mean, I live in a very different area from you. So you're living in the mountains or the foothills in Washington State. What do you do for navigation? Like, have you done any like training and map reading, or like how do you navigate normally when you're in the mountains?
So I have not taken a map reading course. I use apps, and like that's definitely a good idea to take. Definitely. But I do have, now that after I've had this accident or misadventure, whatever you want to call it, I did figure out how to download the topo layer to my app with a Garmin, so that helps. But I think being in an area where I don't know any of the peaks, I run in a lot of the alpine lakes where I do kind of have a general idea of where I am. In this case, I kind of did too, but I didn't know. Obviously, I didn't know enough. So I think, like you mentioned, having a paper map and a compass is probably a good idea for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I have tons of paper maps and I've taken them a lot, like when I go hiking and that kind of thing. But when I go on a run, I don't think I've ever taken a paper map for a run. But then again, I don't live in the mountains. So it's interesting to think about like the extra things you need to take when you're in that kind of more extreme environment.
Definitely. I also ordered a emergency bivvy after my trip. And I really hope I don't ever have to use it, but I don't think I'm ever going to take it out of my pack. So my friends kind of make fun of me for having a giant like backpack when I run, but
My husband always makes fun of me. He's always like, what do you have in there? Are you carrying like the required kit for a race? Like, what do you have in there? And I don't think it's that much. Like I always have a rain jacket because it's England, and I always have like, I don't know, Kleenex in case I have a necessary like bathroom stop that I need to make. But yeah, so you didn't have an emergency bivvy, but you did have like an emergency blanket. What did you have that kept you warm?
I had an emergency blanket, and I had a pretty high quality rain jacket and gloves and wool socks and wool shirt. I didn't really bring too many layers, and it didn't really get that cold. because it was like the heat of summer, the peak of summer.
Oh, perfect.
I would have probably brought another layer had it been going towards fall.
Yeah.
Well, it really wasn't cold. If I hadn't had the emergency blanket, it might have been, but it was more of the mosquitoes that was the issue.
Yeah, I read that, and it's like I always associate mosquitoes with like tropical areas and not mountains, so it was just horrifying to me to read that you were in the mountains and getting killed, like chewed up by mosquitoes.
Yeah, it's all the lakes. It's all the alpine lakes. And it's only a couple weeks or a month out of the summer that they get really bad. And this year we had this giant heat wave that I think made everything worse.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you could go back in time and have this experience again, like what would you do differently?
Well, I definitely would bring more food.
Yeah.
I would start earlier. I think I started around 7 or 7:30 in the morning. I'd probably start at least 5, maybe. And I would like to do it with a friend, I think, ideally. I'm actually thinking of maybe trying it again with a friend just to like to beat it, you know?
Yeah.
maybe next year. I don't know. We'll see. But definitely have the map. And now that I've done it, you know, it's easier. It's more like what would I do in a different if I didn't have the knowledge, I guess.
Yeah. So what do you think went right? Like, what did you do well? Because obviously it was an unexpected night in the forest, but you were fine. Like, you weren't injured. You got out fine. You didn't die of hypothermia. Like, you were fine in the end. So what do you think you did well?
Well, I think that my decision to stop and spend the night was really smart, because I think if I would have kept going, I would have hurt myself.
Yeah.
If it was just like a normal trail, I would have been fine to just walk out. But it was not a normal trail. It was bushwhacking and a cliff. And so that was good. I think that I was able to like keep my cool pretty well. I had like a couple moments where I felt like panicking, but I just tried to like focus on like the true facts of what was going on. Like, okay, I'm out here, but I'm physically okay. I'm not going to die of hunger or thirst. You know, I have a water filter. You don't die of hunger in a day, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I can walk slowly out of here. Like, just trying to like remind myself of like, I'm like a capable person and I can get out of this, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. That must have been a really hard decision to make, though. Because obviously, when you don't plan on spending the night in the forest or in the mountains, like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I've never been in that situation, so I don't know, like, how do you know, like, whether it's smarter to stay the night or smarter to try to walk out slowly, or like how, I don't know. Tell me more.
Well, I like fell a couple times.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to go downhill and I was going the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I felt like physically my legs were just giving out, and that if I kept going, I would hurt myself. I can't explain it exactly, because like I'm an ultra runner, you know, I'm used to like pushing myself, and like I've ran through an entire night before.
Yeah.
But it was different. It was a different kind of situation. And I wasn't totally lost, but I was just like in a bad space, like physically.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I couldn't do it. So I just had to like rest.
Yeah,
I don't know.
No, that makes sense.
I don't know how to describe it.
No, it makes sense. Because, like, I think about times when, like, in life I've been, like, really stressed out and just not doing well mentally. And then I start making a lot of mistakes in my work. And then that's kind of, like, my sign that, like, I need to just stop and force myself to rest, because any work that I do is going to be not good. It's going to be full of mistakes. So it's the same kind of thing, but, like, physically.
Yeah.
Except the mistakes are worse.
Yeah, the mistakes could be deadly. And I think like the stress of like being like kind of lost, and the stress of like falling a couple times like put a lot of like tension in my legs.
Yeah. That
like I couldn't like support my weight anymore. Like I think my body was just like, you need a rest or you're just gonna I don't know.
No, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
So you made the smart decision. So have you been out on your own running since then? And how long did it take to like get back on the horse and like go on your next solo mountain run?
That's a good question. Yeah, it took me a while to do longer stuff. For a while, I just kind of wanted to like lie around and, you know, just rest. I went camping with my son. And then I did do an FKT recently, not the same kind of FKT, a totally like established trail one.
Nice.
At Mount Rainier, 43 miles. I ran through the night, pretty slow pace, but I did it, and that made me feel pretty accomplished. And I've done a couple other things since then. But yeah, it did take me a while, and I think I've like physically recovered as well as mentally now, but it took me about a month.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, I mean, even though you were fine in the end, like, that's pretty traumatic.
It is, yeah.
So you also had, I've been reading through your blog, you had a scary experience last year with cougars.
I did, yeah.
I live in England, so the scariest animal we have is the cow. So when I
Cows are scary. I'm scared of cows.
Yeah, a lot of people are scared of cows here too, but they're the deadliest animal we have on the trails here. So cougars, what happened there, and what was that?
Well, that was another adventure. I was trying to do the Wonderland Trail in one push by myself, and I had started at night and was up on this ridge line and heard this noise, and then there was this cougar walking toward me and a couple more on the other side of the ridge. And I think I scared it off with like a podcast eventually. But that freaked me out, and I had not been trail running like a ton, maybe like a year or two, but I hadn't done like any super long stuff. And I think like now I probably wouldn't have been as scared as I was then, but that kind of made me decide that maybe that kind of trail is too long for me to attempt by myself at this point.
And when you're running at night in these backcountry areas, should you be making noise so that animals know that you're there? Because I always see videos and Americans are running and they're going, "Hey bear, hey bear."
Yeah.
So is that a thing?
Yeah.
You do that?
I know you're not supposed to like put on music, so I'll usually like put on a podcast and play it with people talking, because I feel like that's not as like annoying to people that might be around.
Yeah.
But I don't want to just like be talking the whole time myself. But then if I'm coming near like a campsite, I'll turn it off. And sometimes I'll just yell, "Hey bear," or whatever.
Hey cougar.
Yeah. I have a noisemaker thing now.
Oh.
That it's like a little personal defense thing that you press and it makes a loud like alarm.
Yep, I have one of those.
Which I had to use for a deer recently.
Oh.
That was chasing me. But that's another story.
Okay, tell us about the deer.
That was like a mom, I think, that started chasing me on a trail that had babies. But
God.
I've never like had to use it for a bear cougar, so I'm not sure if it works, but I've heard that the noise like works better than even like bear spray sometimes.
Oh, interesting. So. Well, yeah, because they're not expecting it.
Right.
Probably. I mean, everything's like quiet and beautiful, and then all of a sudden this crazy alarm goes off. It's going to scare the crap out of anyone.
Yeah.
So have your experiences made you nervous about having new solo adventures? Or are you like more confident than ever before?
So I think that my experiences have given me like a healthy appreciation for the outdoors and nature.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to underestimate like the nature and the backcountry.
Yeah.
But I don't want to not have those experiences either.
Yeah.
So I just want to like carefully evaluate my risk before I take on new challenges.
Yeah, and I think the more adventures we have and misadventures, like the more we learn. I mean, if you don't die from the experience, you've hopefully learned something. And that's something you can apply for next time. I mean, you've already learned, like, bring more food. You've bought your emergency bivvy. You've got your bug net for the mosquitoes. Like, you've already learned from that experience. So it just makes us more experienced.
Yes.
That's where the word comes from.
Yes.
So what are your tips for other people, especially women, who may be nervous about having solo adventures in the outdoors?
Well, I don't know. I think it's easier to go out with friends at first or with somebody else at first. But like if you go out on one trail with a friend, then you can try it on your own later. I don't know. It's like, I don't want to like push someone beyond like what they would feel comfortable in, but there's a lot of beautiful things out there and adventure to be had. And I think if you can be careful and like take into account the risk, you know, you can have a really great time. And maps are good.
Maps are good.
Knowing where you are is good. Having enough food and water and, you know, a light source and all, you know, like the 10 essentials is good. But yeah, you just got to do it, I guess. And you'll have some crazy adventures probably. But as long as you can keep your cool, most likely you'll be fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. And start small. I mean, you don't have to start with like a huge adventure where you're like hiking 7 days into the wilderness by yourself. Like, you know, you can start with something small.
definitely.
Easier. So tell us more about your FKTs. I really liked what you said in your blog about how they're always borrowed. And you actually said, feel free to improve my time and set your own records. So tell us about, FKTs, like we didn't really talk about them that much until last year when there were no races. And so everyone had to find something else to do. So tell us a little bit about your FKTs.
Well, I've just recently started doing FKTs or attempting them. It's actually kind of funny because one of my friends that runs with me a bit was talking about it. And there's all these routes, but then there's a lot of women that haven't even put a record on them at all. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, maybe I should try some of those. And I don't consider myself fast at all. Like my blog title is ultra slogging. Like, I don't know. I don't think like I'm an elite or anything, but it's fun to like push yourself and like try to inspire yourself and maybe others to see what you can do. So yeah, I've done that, the Wonderland, not the Wonderland FKT, but the Northern Loop Spray Park figure eight. And then I just did the Labyrinth Mountain, which is a little local mountain that's a very, very steep climb. That was fun as well. So
lovely. So how do you decide which FKTs to try?
I don't know, just like scouring the website and seeing what looks doable.
Yeah.
I have a friend that does some runs with me, but we haven't been able to do it together yet. So, I mean, if I find one on there that looks good, then I'll, research it and check out the trail and that kind of thing. I don't only do FKTs. I like to run other routes too.
Yeah.
It's kind of a newer thing for me.
Yeah.
But I love loop courses and creating long days in the mountains more than anything.
Yeah.
And if I can kind of do that and then like post to like a record on the website, I think it's kind of fun.
Well, I think I'm going to have to check out the website and see if there's anything near me, because I think that's really interesting what you said about how a lot of women don't go for these. So I will check and see if that's the case in my area.
Yeah, you should.
So what does a typical week of running look like for you?
Well, I usually run somewhere between like 4 to 6 days a week with a good amount of strength training.
Oh, that's good.
Then Sunday's my long run. I'm not super structured. I don't know. I just kind of run when I can. And yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good. So Courtney, where can people find your blog and you online and learn more about what you do?
My blog is ultraslogging.wordpress.com. And I'm on Strava. It's Courtney Clifton. I'm not anywhere else, I don't think. But yeah, you can find me there.
Perfect. I will share those links in the show notes as well. I want to see you on Instagram because you live in such a beautiful part of the world. I just want to see where you're running.
I know. I don't have Instagram. I'm kind of old school, but maybe I'll get it someday.
I just like looking at where people run. It's just nice.
I post more on Strava than anything. I post so many pics on Strava.
Okay, well then I will look for you there. I just followed you today on Strava, so I will be stalking you there. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really liked kind of picking apart that misadventure with you and learning from your experience and learning, kind of what you did right and how you got out of there and in one piece, because I think that's the most important thing. Like, things didn't go as planned, but you made some really good decisions and you got out of there fine.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for the chat. I really appreciate it.
Great. All right, thank you. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought about this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and get in touch there. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean the world to me. Remember to visit hollywharton.com/424 for the show notes on this episode. See you next week. And in the meantime, happy trails. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.